And start here. Well, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Tri Nguyen. I'm one of the product managers and market development managers here at Zyxel. Good to have you to be able to discuss some of the promotion that we have going on right now for our USG series, mostly on our access point controller that's built into it. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it is, how you can take advantage of a lot of these functionalities that are already in that USG platform. I wanted to go over a little bit about our company. If you're new to us, again, if you are a partner already with Zyxel, thank you for being a partner. We look forward to just working with you on any kind of issues or projects that you're working on to delivering the best product that fulfills those applications and those needs. Zyxel's been in business for over 28 years. We've been in the networking industry for 29 years. Since 1989, we have over 700,000 businesses that are using Zyxel solutions. We have over 1,500 employees worldwide with a lot of the devices, about 100 million devices overall in the global space. We have 150 global presence markets, you can say, or different countries that we have a presence in. We have products that fulfill all sorts of networking needs, from the telco service provider side of things, business connectivity, and also in the connected home. So we provide a full range. I pretty much say anything that we have connected to the internet, we have some sort of product, whether it's wireless, wired, wireless, Ethernet, fiber, DSL technologies. Zyxel has some sort of solution for that. We also pride ourselves in our R&D capabilities. We have over 150 global and local tech support personnel, and over 500 people who are in our software and hardware engineering worldwide. So you can see literally like over a third of our workforce is in the R&D side of it. It's because we make design, the hardware, the software, in majority of the cases there, and we have access to all that. So it gives actually advantages to partners like yourselves to be able to give us feedback and to be able to kind of influence. We like to listen to what our partners are wanting to do business in the market. So so feel free, if you ever have any product ideas, thoughts on how to improve, or things that you're seeing within your market, in your field, how we can fulfill it and help you with those areas, reach out to us and let us know, because we'll be able to take a look at that. We have a comprehensive portfolio, a range of products and solutions, really to give kind of that one network experience. We innovate a bunch of technologies and use them together. So we use it in a way that's secure. We want to focus on ease of use of the technologies, especially nowadays. Things are getting more and more complex, like all the time. We're adding new functions, new features. So really being able to offer an ease of use for both the end users or the IT administrators, managed service providers, to maintain those systems. Security appliances that have UTM, VPN capabilities, encryption, switching functionality for fiber, like I mentioned, 10 gig uplinks, PoE applications, wireless access points, and those kinds of applications, be able to do smart antenna, high concentration functionality, high concentration of people in like hospitality, education. We have gateways that handle the hotspot functionality. So if you're looking to do, hotspot terms of service, authentication, that kind of thing, or even Facebook Wi-Fi integration, we have products that fulfill that. And it's all encompassed into our network management platforms, either whether it's a standalone software management within the devices themselves, or through the cloud, through some of our solutions that are cloud-based. We focus a lot on hospitality applications, especially in what I'm going to be talking about, with our AP controller function. These kinds of applications typically have many access points, right? In a school or in a hotel, there's maybe 20 to hundreds of access points that potentially could be deployed to give that coverage area within that hotel hospitality. So being able to use kind of more some way to centralize management of it, or a controller of some sort, is kind of imperative to be able to manage that kind of complex network, or that just mass quantity of devices. The same goes for the education as well, right? We're deploying access points in the classroom to handle high density. You might have like 50 iPads and laptops, Google Chromebooks and stuff that are inside the classroom that all need wireless access, and they're all competing in that wireless space. So typically in a smart classroom deployment, there are multiple access points that are deployed within that same coverage area, both for load balancing and also failover situations as well. So again, you're dealing with, you know, many access points that need to be either controlled centrally with a controller, or what we'll be talking about that's built into our USG series or our firewall series. So let's talk a little bit about what our UTM and VPN appliances are. We have a whole series, a whole portfolio of products that fulfill that. The NSG series is mostly our cloud solution. That's our Nebula cloud functionality. So those are kind of a separate portfolio that has its own kind of central management of access points and gateways and switches. The VPN series and above over here on this side, they all include VPN capabilities, and then as you move up, they become more complex, or in terms of more secure in some ways, if you're looking for those applications. So on the far right hand side, you'll see their full UTM solutions over here. Those include like antivirus, intrusion detection, content filtering, anti-spam, as well as the AP controller that we'll be talking about. The AP controller function is included within our VPN series as well. So the VPN series, the Zyxel series, and the USG. A little bit about our VPN series. That we have, again, a portfolio of them as well. We just recently launched this new generation of VPN products that are higher performance, higher throughput, higher number of concurrent VPN tunnels at a very cost-effective price point. So if you're looking at doing site-to-site or client-to-site type applications with VPN encryption, these are the perfect products to fulfill that and really maximize kind of the bandwidth that you probably are bringing into your offices now, or even do multiple WAN load balancing and failover situations as well. So these are just some of the specs that you'll see there. And you'll see at the bottom here, the wireless LAN count. The VPN series, they come with 4 access points that it can manage by default. And then they can go up to 34 all the way up to 260 access points later on when we release our VPN 1000 model. In the Zyxel series, which is kind of our previous generation of VPN, the controllers come default, or the Zyxels come default with 2 access points that it can control out of the box, and then can be upgraded to 34 all the way up to 258 access points on the USG 2200. Actually, that number has actually been increased. With firmware, we've actually increased it to 1026, I believe. So you're able to do 1,026 access points on any kind of special projects that you may have that need that kind of size deployment. And then, of course, if you're looking for a full UTM product that has full functionality, like I mentioned, all the UTM capabilities, as well as being an access controller, this is the product line that you would choose. The USG series that has anywhere default 2 access points out of the box, can be upgraded to 18, 34, all the way up to 130 access points. And really, it's about security. In our UTM product line, it's very full featured. It has antivirus, firewall, intrusion detection to prevent about malware, the wireless built-in controller. It has application intelligence so that you can decide if, hey, this is this kind of traffic, like Netflix traffic, or this is World of Warcraft traffic, and be able to make decisions based on that. Or even for good traffic like Office 365, we can prioritize that and make sure that that traffic is getting out. Anti-spam capabilities, and very importantly, VPN encryption for site-to-site, again, like I mentioned, and then content filtering, being able to block like inappropriate content, including encrypted web pages like HTTPS sites like Facebook or social media or YouTube, being able to do domain name blocking as well as categorization. So I wanted to talk about a little bit on what we're introducing. It's kind of like a little bit unknown or little known fact that our USG series has been integrated for quite some time now with a built-in wireless controller. We feel like as the gateway, It's kind of the central piece that you typically are managing your security, all the access, the management of that network. And what better place is that to managing your several access points or more, 10 to 20 access points or whatever in your network, in that same central place. So we've armed our USG and integrated with what we call APC, which is our access point controller. It's not very, very difficult in terms of the acronym there. Version 3.0, which is actually the same version as our NXC series. So if you're used to using our standalone controller models, this is now using that same, basically same firmware or the same feature set as that controller, integrated into the USG itself. And so you can actually find this in your USGs now. If you have a USG out there that you're currently deploying or you're installing, you'll find it under the wireless section of the configuration. So if you go to the configuration here tab, you go over to the wireless, you'll see there's options here to enable the controller detection, either it be manual or by automatic. That's when the access points kind of call home. It kind of broadcasts to the network, says, hey, I'm here, I'm an access point. Do I have a controller on me? If not, I'm gonna go into standalone mode. But if you are, then here I am, take me in, send me what I need to be, configurations, firmwares, whatever it is, and get me going. So you can manage those APs within the system on the USG itself to be able to create the different AP groups, the policies that the APs follow for security, for WPA access or whatever, for authentication, and what firmwares they all belong to as well. So you can go there and find out and mess around. Again, the products typically come with at least 2 access points. And I'll talk about which access points work with, are integrated with the AP controller. But some of the features of that APC 3.0, it has, it's kind of like a standalone controller. You can either use it as a standalone controller, or you can use our USG products that will fulfill the controller function. Some of the features is that it offers auto healing, where you have multiple access points. In case one access point goes down, it actually can increase the power output of a nearby AP as long as it's not maxed out, and be able to help to cover the other areas. So typically in the deployment, you may put each AP at like 80% output power, so there's a little bit more overlap if you're trying to do the healing. That way, when one goes down, this one will expand 20 more percent. The ones around it will give you also 20% as they expand their coverage, just as temporary, so you can still have some coverage, so you can come in there and do a break fix at a later time without having a big giant dead spot. You can use wireless mesh technologies, so you can allow for you to have like a repeater AP without being wired directly to it. It can act and function as a mesh in the controller. I'm going to talk a little bit about the client band steering in the later slide. That's really choosing or helping the device be on either 2.4 gig or 5 gigahertz, whatever the controller decides is best for the network. Client isolation, being able to make sure that the wireless clients are all isolated from each other. So that's very important in a hospitality or in a education kind of application. And the other function is zero AP config deployment, meaning that you can actually pre-configure a lot of the configurations for your site within the USG. And once that AP dials home to the USG, it says, hey, here I am, give me my config file. It will actually push that entity or the identity of that access point to it automatically. That way you can have very easy deployment as long as it gets plugged into the network and is able to logically get back to your gateway. Like the USG here, it can get all those configurations, port groupings, VLANs, whatever it may be, using the protocol there. It's also equipped with intelligent channel selection, so dynamic, the DCS there, being able to help to mitigate interference by kind of coordinating what channels the access points are on. So you can set up on an auto DFS, dynamic channel selection functionality. Just click the box and allow for it to make the decisions. Now, of course, you can always hard code it in to make sure that you have everything planned out the way you want it to be, when you installed it. rogue AP detection, you can isolate as well, so it can help to facilitate to detect other APs that shouldn't be on the network, that is trying to get, that's maybe causing interference and such. So it can detect those. It has radius and Active Directory integration, captive portal functionalities, and if you use some of our USG series, you can enable hotspot functions. So some of those gateway functions like terms of service, billing, class billing, based on time or based on bandwidth, we can integrate that within the system as well. So that captive portal is pretty important on getting that authentication capture there. Advanced access point load balancing. So we can actually load balance between, APs that are in the same coverage area. And that's very important, especially in a smart classroom or in a conference room setting, maybe in a hotel or a conference center, where you may have, let's say, 2 or more access points very close to each other. You can set a threshold so that not everybody's overloading one access point, but instead they are, the access point will kind of kick or not allow association, so that when it hits that minimum or hits its max threshold, and allows for people to then connect to the other access point that's in that same coverage area. So then it helps for overall user experience, being able to not overload a single access point. And of course, fast roaming, 802.11r, being able to pre-authenticate as they move across. If you're using like 802.1x or any kind of other authentication, we can pass that information on to the other access points as people are moving. Now, of course, the number one question that we always get is, do we have roaming? Meaning that they don't necessarily are needing the, perfect roam, seamless roaming, situation. It's more of, can I have the same SSID in my bedroom or in my hotel room as I do in the pool? And so if I roam to from the bedroom to the pool, I could just connect without having to re-log in or re-find or connect to an AP. And the answer to that is yes. I mean, as long as the SSIDs are the same, as long as the users then move away from their original access point that they were connected to, it will automatically associate to another access point. And I'll talk about how that can cause problems and how we actually mitigate that. And I'll have some slides on that as well. NAT traversal, being able to connect even if it's behind a NAT back to the gateway, so it helps to facilitate your installations, etc. Local bridge or tunnel mode support. With APC 3.0, you can actually tunnel all traffic from the access point. There's some applications that requires, let's say for security, you don't want you going to an AP and going straight to a let's say a billing server or some other network device. You could tunnel it all the way back to, let's say, the USG, so then it gets processed, maybe scanned for viruses or intrusion protocols or whatever it is, before it goes back, within your network back to those kind of other devices in the network. So you can tunnel all that traffic back. Typically, you don't need to do that, but we have that option. We can then do full security with WPA Enterprise or 802.1x. Client signal management is that feature that I was going to talk to you about how we can create literally signal boundaries based on their thresholds and their connectivity to make sure that you're authenticating or connecting to the right access point. You can schedule tasks, meaning you can script different tools, or you can, set up firmware upgrades or any kind of management configuration pushes, etc. You can schedule those kinds of things, or even power reboots, recycles, etc. Through the controller. And then also dynamic VLAN, being able to use the same SSID, but based on a radius authentication, we can assign that user a dynamic VLAN, even though a VLAN tag, even though they're on the same access point, same SSID as the public. So we can manage those kinds of functions as well. So here are a lot of the other features that you'll see that I'm probably not going to cover today, but what you want to look at is the APC 3.0 column. This is what is included within our USG, and these are also in our NXC controllers as well. So you see there's an abundance of functions that are part of our controller functionality that we've integrated into our gateway. And these are the supported models. The APC 3.0 primarily is our USG and our Zyxel VPN series. So as long as you're not going to their hotspot gateways, et cetera, which have maybe a lesser or a lighter version of our controller. These are the ones that we're focusing on. And the USG 40s and 60s, those are the models that we're currently running a promotion on. I'll talk about what that promotion is at the end here. But let's cover now and just jump into a little bit about our wireless technology, which is kind of the main reason why we put controller functionalities into our gateway. We feel that, you know, we need a central place to manage these access points, but it's for a reason, right? Because access points tend to have more than one, whereas the gateway is typically just one per network. You may have 20 or hundreds of access points that are in that network. So I wanted to talk about how our access points, you know, are really we feel is some of the best product technology that's out there. We've designed it, you know, really with the focus of making sure the user experience and also the partner experience of the product is, you know, really robust. It's fine-tuned, and so we take pride in what we've designed. You can see like just a blown-up picture if you ever get a chance to kind of open it to take a look at what's inside. You know, we have shielding plates on the back end, so that helps to mitigate interference between access points, because the main culprit of a lot of the interference comes from the PCB board itself, because you have all these components that are sitting next to each other. They're not only interference with everything around them, but also interfering with themselves, like within that PCB board. So you can see we do, you know, shielded, we shield out the components, we layer shielding on top of those components again, and even the antenna board, the antenna array is also sitting on top of metal shielding as well to prevent it from causing interference within itself. So the ultimate experience that ultimately what happens is users will have better throughput. We typically will have better coverage, better signal strength, but not just that, but we're doing it in a very still cost-effective way, but being not sacrificing hardware longevity. So if you look at some of our MTBF, that's why we offer in our business class access points a limited lifetime warranty on them. So we really trust in our hardware. We're using solid state capacitors rather than, you know, the salt capacitors they're very cheap out in the market. You know, we use a solid state, which pretty much will last for a lot longer than those other ones. So those are the typical components that will fail. So we take pride in our hardware and how we've designed it. But we've also integrated some features in the software side that makes it even better. Our portfolio ranges anywhere, you know, between the cloud NAP series all the way to our standalone with Nebula Flex, all the way when you look at when you're looking for something that can be cloud or controller managed, like with our USG that we had talked about. It's our 5000 series and above. So anything NWA 5123 all the way through our WAC series flagship smart antenna models. You can see those are all hardware controller or standalone. So it's really flexible in that. So it's standalone or controller, so it can detect, like I mentioned, if it's powered up in the network and it calls out and broadcasts to the network, hey, you know, here I am. If it hears something back, then the controller will take control of it, give it its firmware. Now, if it doesn't it doesn't find anything, no one responds to it, it switches itself automatically to standalone mode, which then, you know, you can go to the IP address, or you can use some of our management tools to be able to go into it, you know, change IPs, upgrade firmware, do all those kinds of things. But of course, the benefit again is the zero AP config deployment using a controller, being able to use that. This is where the product comes into play. Multiple SSID and VLAN support. So you can have up to 16 SSIDs on the access point, and then integrate that with also, and tag them with individual VLANs. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, that dynamic VLAN capabilities as well. It's also integrated with Smart Connect, meaning that through the access point, it will actually be able to see the switches, the Zyxel switches that it's connected to. You'll be able to click through that, and then on the switches, you can actually click through to the gateway, to the USG series, or, you know, so it's all integrated in there. So it is able to see the neighboring devices that are there. It's integrated with quality of service, any of the WMM features, being able to make sure that the traffic is moving through securely, through with the higher priorities. Radius integration, like I mentioned before, it's important for the hotspot functionality, or even just 802.1x authentication. LED suppression, being able to turn off the blinking lights, especially in a hotel or in a classroom where you don't want it either to be a distraction or make it noticeable for somebody to want to try to steal or whatever it is. They're all of our access points are power over Ethernet enabled. We're using the 802.3AT standards, which is backwards compatible to the AF standards as well. So we're using standard PoE, so you can use our switches with that, including for VoIP applications, IP camera applications. So we have a whole switch line that will manage that for you. And then it's all integrated with Zyxel One Network, and that's both product integration as well as a standalone software if you need to do some configurations and management. So some of the features, like I mentioned earlier, that's important within our access points that we've integrated is, to help solve some certain situations. So there's always a situation where client stations, are trying to connect to a Wi-Fi. And a lot of devices like, your mobile devices and such, right now they're dual band. They have a 2.4 and, 5 gigahertz. They're running, 11 AC, but can be backwards compatible to 11N. So it kind of gives it that flexibility. And so one is the device kind of chooses which one to connect to, right? Whatever maybe it sees as a better signal, but it doesn't care about interference necessarily. It just kind of picks what it thinks is best. Also, when it's roaming from one location, from one AP to another, it's also traditionally the discretion of the device. So the device is the one that chooses when it should, move over, and some of them, the tolerance level, the max tolerance is usually like a neg like 90 dB or around there, but typically at that 90 dBm it's unusable, and we know this, like if you have an Apple product, I have Apple products and it's notorious. So as you're roaming somewhere, it's like, man, I've driven 10 houses down and it's still showing that I'm connected to Wi-Fi, even though the signal strength is really bad. And so it's like I'm trying to wait for it to, roam over to LTE. So the same thing happens too when you're in a hotel. You're walking from AP to AP, and it tries to, it's sticky. It stays connected to that original access point that it connected to. So we have solutions in software that can handle that, and I'll tell you a little bit about how we manage that. So on the signal threshold side of things, you may be under an access point and you have a good signal, and then you move, a little further away, your signal's still poor, but you're still connected to that original station. And then even if you're moving in further, you have a bad signal, but it's still connected to that workstation, right? So, how do we solve that? So with our products, we actually have the ability to what we call set up signal thresholds within the access points. So as you're moving away from that coverage of that original access point, it's reconnecting. We're forcing the device to reconnect. So within actually the GUI itself, you're able to set and enable the signal thresholds. So you can set the station's threshold, and then you can set when you want it to disassociate. So you can mess around with these numbers. Typically, we have this at like a -80 for the disassociation. So, again, you can play around with what works best within, your system, and be able to force the device to connect, or even will not allow for them to even connect to. So in this one, it's the minimum signal strength the client has to have in order to connect to the AP. This might be a little, little high, because usually if it's -80, you can always set whatever you want, but they have to have a minimum number to be able to connect. And then of course, when they get farther away, we disconnect them and force them to connect to a stronger access point. Now, of course, we also have, you see here, there's station connection, multiple retries. We always want to be a hard line, hey, if you're not at -80, we're going to disassociate you. But in fact, we're actually still nice. You can actually allow for it to connect back if there was multiple retries. That means, let's say you have an AP that's kind of sitting on the edge. There's no other access points that are around it. The user roamed, to that -80, got disconnected. It's trying to reconnect back to that SSID. It only sees that access point, tries several times, and then we say, oh, since you can't find another access point, we'll let you back on again, even though you're below that threshold. So you can enable that if you want, or you can take that hard-nosed, hard stance and say, no, you're gone because you can't get service. Okay. The band selection, part of it as well is built into our APs and our controller functions. You're able to help the device based on what it's able to connect to. We can respond to the, preferred band. We know that 2.4 is usually saturated. It has less channels. There's usually tons of devices on 2.4, so there's always interference. So the more we can move the dual clients to 5 gigahertz, the better. So in this case, if you have like an older device that just has like BGN that's only on 2.4, then it can connect to the AP no problem on 2.4. But on a dual mode device, which are most devices nowadays, they try to send a request on both the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz at the same time. But instead of us responding to the 2.4 connection, we'll respond to the 5 gigahertz gig connection side of things. So then it associates at 5 gigahertz instead. The cool thing is you don't necessarily have to have a different SSID for the 5 gigahertz. You can still call it the same SSID, and it will just connect to either of the technologies, either of the bands. So you can set that here within our profile. So you can go to the configuration object profiles, go to the SSID when you're configuring those objects, and choose the how you want to enable that band select. So a little bit about our smart antenna technology that we wanted to talk about, which is kind of the secret sauce especially in our high-end products. It's an award-winning technology. It's patented technology, and we're proud of it, especially in cases where there's a lot of concentration of people. And one thing I wanted just to mention, that smart antenna technology is not beamforming, because beamforming it kind of steers the RF energy to a client, and it's typically only beneficial as if the client itself also has beamforming, but it also can produce some combinations that actually kind of mess around with the signals itself. So you can see if you had a single antenna with a normal signal, or in a situation where you have a dual antenna, you have the normal signal, you have a phased amplitude signal, and so those start to kind of wobble and kind of cancel each other out or cause some phasing that happens. So you can have a moving phase as people are moving around too. So it just kind of messes around with the overall signal. With just in general, the AC Wave 2, the second gen that has beamforming, typically you can only have like up to maybe 15% of throughput performance increase. So it's more of that improving of the low end sensitivity. It just has a little bit better sensitivity. In a single user, like a MIMO situation in an access point, typically you have to communicate, almost like in a serial, right? It's singular communication. So an AP is talking to a client. The client then talks to the other PC or to the other device in the network, one at a time. So then you can imagine if you're increasing the number of devices within the network, that just is taking up much more time of that signal space, band space, to be able to communicate. So overall throughput basically goes down. You now have more interference possibilities because you have more devices. In a multi-user MIMO deployment, which is what our 11AC Wave 2 implementation does, is actually it can communicate devices at the same time. So you have multiple devices communicating up to multiple streams at the same time to each other, to the devices. So overall throughput, you can technically have 300% increase in overall traffic that's happening within that network. May not necessarily be the traffic from you and the AP, but because there's no delays, there's no kind of signal sharing or band sharing or time sharing within that access point, you actually have an overall increase of throughput. And there's a lot of challenges in wireless environments today. In the wireless 2.4, like I mentioned earlier, the spectrum is quite limited in terms of channels. Your 20 megahertz band that you typically use for wireless connectivity is very small, and you could only have pretty much 3 channels, the 1, 6, and 11, that don't intersect or kind of cross interfere. But what can you do? I mean, there's only a limited number. So if you want to have faster speeds, you have to use a larger channel width, and that means you have less channels to actually use. You're actually faced with what we call co-channel interference. So what is co-channel interference? It's basically, if you think about kind of a highway that has a merge that happens, and it's a blind merge. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So there's inevitably going to be, the more traffic you have, the more people you have on that highway, it's going to crash, right? They're going to hit each other. So that's what happens with co-channel interference. The data is getting collided and bumping into each other and having resends to a point where it gets very inefficient. So traditional methods of dealing with co-channel interference is to actually have a coverage area and then reducing the coverage area. So you would turn down the power of the access points, but in doing so, when you turn down the power, you still have interference that's happening outside of the coverage area, but then you have a dead spot, right? So you can mitigate some of it, but then there's a trade-off. So how do we fix that, or how do we solve that problem? So what we've done was, with our smart antenna technology that's integrated in our WAC series, we've integrated a technology that lets it increase the capacity, reduces interference, reduces that co-channel interference, and then as a result, it increases coverage. And in doing it at a very kind of cost-effective, less power-consuming way. And it's actually capable of helping devices that are both in 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, and those devices don't even need to have the technology. So it's actually agnostic to what device you're using. It doesn't need, like beamforming. It's not like beamforming where you need both sides to make the benefit, right? We're doing all the work for those devices. So what is a smart antenna and how does it work? So you can see on the left here is our conventional omnidirectional antenna. It just has kind of an overall space. And then we also have what looks like a 90-degree directional antenna. So those are kind of our typical antennas that you would see in a market today. But with smart antenna, it's a little different. It's very dynamic. So let's say you have a Wi-Fi client that's up here at the top, and then down below you have some sort of interference, whether it be microwave or whatever it is. The device actually can scan for that. And so what it does is it looks at 700 different patterns and it optimizes what pattern it will use to communicate with this Wi-Fi client. That happens all within 100 milliseconds. And you can see at the bottom here, the signal and the receive is basically ignoring or no longer listening to the interference. My prime example or kind of analogy on this is, think about if I'm standing in the field, a big field, and you're on that other side of that field. I'm doing one thing where I am talking, cupping my mouth and speaking to you so you can hear me better because all of my voice is focused towards you. At the same time, I'm also cupping my ears and listening to you as well in that direction. So if you do that yourself, obviously you'll notice that you don't hear anything, or you hear less of things behind you, and it's all very front-facing or forward-facing now. So that's how the communication works with the smart antenna. And that even works as the device is moving around. So as the device starts to roam, it starts to do its pattern, looks for a different pattern, continues to do that until it keeps finding it as you're moving around. Again, just changing where you're going. Again, ultimately, a better signal, better throughput, less interference. So we've done a lot of performance testing as well. We have a giant amphitheater that's in our Zyxel headquarters, and there's an auditorium out there. And we've done basically, typical Wi-Fi coverage tests and speed tests while we're, passing traffic. It's not just a ping test, it's not just a signal strength test, but we're actually seeing how real traffic is actually flowing through. Because you all know that when you're deploying wireless, you can see a great 4 bars of signal, but I can't pass a ping of traffic, right? So what we're trying to do is to show that how much traffic can you actually still use even when you're in these kind of difficult situations. So in the 2.4, comparing against a lot of the brand names that are out there, we continue to outperform them, especially when we get farther and farther out in the locations. So you can see where the AP is sitting, and as we move, and even through these concrete walls and into the concrete wall of the auditorium at P4, the Zyxel WAC with the smart antenna is still outperforming. It's still getting about around 70 something megabits per second of throughput. The same thing happens as well in the 5 gigahertz range. And as well, 5 gigahertz doesn't traverse walls and obstacles and interference as well as 2.4 because of the wavelength, right? So even in that particular case. In the short runs, we're pretty, we're still above, but not the best. But immediately when you move to some sort of interference or through a wall, our smart antenna technology and implementation actually is performing really well. In fact, even at the end here in P4, in our tests, we actually noticed that others at P4 would go down to zero. Basically, all the other access points would basically cannot pass traffic. And yet we're still delivering 65 megabits of throughput at that point, which is kind of interesting that even when we were a little bit closer, we were doing 60. So maybe there was some sort of reflection, some sort of, just where it was. It delivered actually a better connectivity when you went to that farther location in 5 gigahertz. Remember, just keeping that in mind. So we're very competitive. In fact, a third-party research university in Italy, the University of Bruxelles, did a kind of an independent research. They wanted to research on how smart antenna in general was beneficial, or how it mitigated co-channel interference. So they actually took, Zyxel, Aruba, Cisco, and Ruckus to the test, and kind of put it through a bunch of different scenarios with laptops that are moving from one to another while there was co-channel interference happening. They would cross them over, from access point to mess around with where it's associated, et cetera, and cause more interference. And you notice too, the only two players that are out there that have some sort of smart antenna technology is Zyxel and Ruckus there. And yet, what was found out is that Zyxel actually performed better across the board in co-channel interference situations, better coverage with our access points, especially in against even the Cisco access points. That's 56% better than them, and then 45% better than the other smart antenna vendor, being able to have more aggregate throughput while in those kinds of scenario situations. So you can find out. You can always Google. You can Google University of Bruxelles smart antenna research, and it should give you a white paper to all the little details that they've checked out and their results. So what we have in our promo is what we wanted to kind of mention to you. You may have already seen it, or you may not. What we are offering is a free AP Max Upgrade license for our USG series. So if you have currently in the market a USG 40 or USG 60 series, that includes the -NB versions, the ones with UTM, the wireless versions, anything within that series, these two series. So I think there's 8 models or so. You can actually just register based on the MAC address and serial number, and we'll give you a free controller license that unlocks it. So I think it goes to 18 access points. So we give you basically a license that allows for you to manage 18 access points. And that's a $600 value today, but you can get that for the life of the product. So it's just a one-time open. You just have to register each device. So if you have partners or customers that already have these devices in the field and you want to take advantage of getting that max license, do that. It only goes to the end of July in terms of when you can redeem for or request for these license keys. Then you have until the end of September to activate them and put them into, and turn them on within the device or append them to your devices that you're managing. So, take advantage of that to get to the site, to get to this promo page. If you go to our website, which is just Zyxel.com, it'll take you to the US version of the website. One of the banner slides that you'll see on the front page will be the AP controller license giveaway. So click on that, fill out some information to register the device, and then you'll get an email with the license key, shortly after. So take advantage of that. Hopefully you'll be able to use that either to, in any of your projects that you're working on, or again, just to upsell even your customers that are already existing with the free license. Say, hey, I'm going to give you a free controller license. We're deploying, we want to deploy these access points within your network, or to give you advantages of what I've told you, with the band steering, the all of the wireless technologies that are capable within our APs, being able to manage those from that central location. So it gives you some opportunity, and it's something that we're giving free away. So take advantage of that. All right, at this time, if there's any questions, please use the Q&A section and send me some questions if you want, and we'll try to answer them. If at this time you have no questions and don't want to stick around for the Q&A session, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being a partner or looking to become a partner at Zyxel. Hopefully you'll take advantage of this access control AP controller license, so you can really unlock that potential of that function within our USGs and take advantage of all those cool Wi-Fi functions that are available within our Wi-Fi, being able to manage and provision them all from a single gateway. Yeah, just to clarify one of the questions, the licenses, the license is a one-time license. You do not have to renew it. It's a one-time unlock. So for the life of that product, when you go to myzyxel.com, which is where you register and manage the devices, once you've applied that to your account, you then apply it to which device you want it to be active on. And then once it's tied to that max serial, it's going to stay there for the life of that product. So you don't have to pay again, or it won't disappear at the end of September. It will just continue to work with 18 APs for the life of that product that you have. One other question was, does this promo include some of the other models that were not mentioned? It's only for the USG 40 and 60 series. So kind of that low entry level, mid-end side. It's primarily where we do most of our business and most of the projects. So we that's where the promo is being offered at this time. Of course, if you're looking to be able to manage more access points within a gateway, then you want to look at our higher end USG models. But there's no promo, in relation to that. But those ones can support 30 something to all the way up to 1026 access points, like I mentioned earlier. All right, it looks like there's no other questions at this time. I'm going to go ahead and close up the webinar. If you do have a question, though, please feel free to reach out to your sales rep, be able to talk to them. They'd be able to bridge to me or to one of our sales engineers to have any discussions. And if you have any projects or any other questions like that, feel free to reach out to them, or you can email me direct. My email is tri@zyxel.com. Again, thank you for spending some time here with me this morning or this afternoon, and hope you have a great day, and looking forward to being your networking ally. So thanks again.